But that was a bad thing. Central banks and income tax happened at the same time, kind of because they had to. That was 1913, very bad year for liberty. Next big thing, I think, in my view, was the switch in time to save nine, the court packing scheme of FDR, when he decided to get his way with these new programs for the New Deal, which a lot of these were started by Hoover, by the way. Hoover didn't have the chutzpah to get them passed, and FDR coerced the court by threatening to double the number of justices on the bench. And the justices reversed their previous decisions, kind of miraculously, and they called that the switch in time to save nine. And one of the things they did was cite that Marbury versus Madison, Marshall's statement that I mentioned before. But anybody who'd actually read Marbury versus Madison would understand that Marshall was actually saying the opposite of all of that. But that's one thing, bad thing that happened. So the courts suddenly were granted a whole lot of power, not because the courts took the power, but because politicians wanted to give them the power. Because the whole point of giving the courts the power is that the courts would then give the politicians the power. So now politicians say, we didn't want all this power, but the courts, gosh, these unelected guys, they make these decisions, they call it judicial activism, and they're giving me all these authorities I didn't want. Come on. So that's another thing that happened. And then every war. And you can't have a war without causing trouble. It doesn't matter if it was a Spanish-American war. Some people say the main incident was pretty suspicious, but after that war, wars just kept getting increasingly suspicious. Wilson's war, World War I was such a problem. It caused so many. It caused the Soviet Union. We probably wouldn't have the Soviet Union if it weren't for the fact that we paid Russia to stay in World War I, weakened their military, and they collapsed. We wouldn't have Iraq, if it weren't created in 1920. We wouldn't have all the meddling that was done through wars and violence back in the early part of the last century led to World War II. And World War II, I hate to put it this way, but whose side did we? We took Stalin's side, we turned against Chiang Kai-shek, and we ended up backing Mao. That really didn't work the way we advertised. And while I'm not going to deny that there was a certain amount of justice to World War II, we had to clean up our World War I mess. And we caused a big problem in World War I. And Hitler was, no doubt, a problem. But by the time we entered the war, just factually speaking here, Hitler had already attacked Russia. And Hitler had already, kind of gotten himself in way over his head. And actually, if we had let those two clobber each other, they probably would have both been gone at the end of it, if we had just stayed out. Now, it could be also we would have lost England. We could have lost some allies. Bad things could have happened, so I'm not going to second guess that. But the fact is, we gained a lot of so-called federal authority as a result of that war. We gained an awful lot more authority as a result of Vietnam. And now you see, since 9/11, we've never seen anything like this. The number of policing units now looking at citizens, the amount of snooping that's done on citizens, and the force used against citizens. It used to be that we understood that searching people without a warrant, kicking in a door, or taking property without a warrant or any good cause, we used to know that was bad. But now all you have to do is just say, well, terrorists might use it, or terrorists. Just say anything about terrorists. These guys armed with exploding shoes and box cutters did more to this country than the Soviet Union did with nukes. You think about how, in the time of the nuclear threat, we had, duck and run, duck and cover. I don't remember what that was called, but, when you're supposed to get under a desk or something like that. It's kind of quaint. People were building bomb shelters and stuff like that, but the government didn't do anything to us. The government still was still understood that we wanted our liberties, and we had liberties that we don't have anymore. And another thing, I suppose, and I guess I have to cite, since I'm talking about historical things, I really shouldn't have missed this one. The 18th Amendment was interesting, and that at the time they wrote the 18th Amendment, which prohibited the sale of liquor, they understood they had to amend the Constitution to prohibit the sale of anything. They couldn't tell you what you could not sell at all until the 18th Amendment. Well, the 18th Amendment was repealed, but somewhere in there, some magic happened. Between the 18th Amendment and the 21st Amendment, the states, without amending their constitutions, acquired this authority to say, well, we're a tri-county, or we can sell, like Pennsylvania, they actually sell liquor. That's the biggest liquor wholesaler in the world, the state of Pennsylvania. And the laws that surround all of this stuff is so wacky, and it's all unconstitutional, because nobody amended their constitution with anything like the 18th Amendment to give them the authority. But then it goes beyond alcohol. By what authority do we regulate the sale of cabbage? You know, there's nothing in the Constitution that says that we can regulate the sale of anything. So, you know, what's frustrating is that we have allowed this to just ipso facto, you know, to sort of happen. And that's sad. That's ignorant. Yes.
What you just said related to one of the things I wanted to bring up, by the way, that about the amending the Constitution and making alcohol illegal. I found that to be really effective when canvassing for Ron Paul to start people to realize, oh yeah, we are drifting away from the Constitution. Ron Paul's made that point several times. That, like you just said, what I wanted to bring up was of us that are here. What is it that we see the issues that prevent someone from making this step in logic? And what are the things, because that's what we need to work on in order to
I wish I knew.
convert others.
I'm open to suggestions, because you know, one of the things that I've been talking about the Constitution for, you know, actually about 20 years. Now, when I first started running as a libertarian, there were a lot of libertarians who were telling me, oh, every time you say Constitution, their eyes glaze like stuffed squirrels and they don't listen anymore. So people were, in the Libertarian Party, they would understand that this just isn't true. And libertarians didn't want to hear about the Constitution. It was just too much for some reason. We've been led so far away from it.
Yeah.
I don't think there's nearly as much resistance anymore. I think there have been people, you know, I think what's kind of funny is that out of the, just imagine the Bill of Rights as sort of a compromise between Democrats and Republicans, because that's sort of what it was. You know, you have the people that want sort of, I don't even know what Democrats and Republicans are anymore, frankly. But it's sort of, if you imagine sort of the Whigs and Tories argument, where you have, you know, people that want a very tightly focused and controlled government, and those who want a very powerful Hobbesian despot. That was sort of the balance. And so you had a compromise in the Bill of Rights, and that, you know, there was a time when we could all agree that we wanted all 10. Now you ask anybody these days, you know, almost anybody, and they'll have quibble about at least one of the Bill of Rights. And most Democrats and Republicans will have big quibbles about a lot of them. For instance, I don't know very many Democrats will grant the Second Amendment. At least not, I mean, even the pro-gun Democrats will hedge on the Second Amendment. And they'll say, well, you have to have some kind of regulation. In fact, most Republicans do too. Almost nobody will grant the 9th and 10th. Maybe it's because they haven't read it. But nobody grants the 9th and 10th. Some people want parts of the they want the 4th Amendment. Some people want parts of the 1st Amendment. But almost nobody wants the whole thing. And so I think one of the key issues, one of the problems, as we've dissected out individual issues like Roe v. Wade, or evolution, or gun rights, and these little issues have pitted, you know, we've gone bipolar on these things. And we pit ourselves against each other on issues like abortion. It's not about the use of authority, it's not about the use of violence, it's about these individual issues. I don't know how to deal with that. You know, basically what I'm asking people to do is go from over here where we're talking about, you know, Roe v. Wade as an individual issue when we need a court, you know, decision to fix this, or, you know, some kind of where we have evolution and we have to do something about this. I want them to think about the authority to even talk about those issues. That is such a paradigm shift. I don't know how to make that paradigm shift.
But Andy, isn't those kind of issues more state-directed? They certainly shouldn't be a federally directed issue. And most people don't even get that philosophy.
I agree, absolutely.
I mean, they don't understand that the original writers of the Constitution had no dream of having such an issue ever being the purview of the federal government. That was never intended to be a purview of the federal government. I mean, when we look at how broad